Hello, cello heads. I'm Tricia Lasoda, and welcome to Cello Straight Talk. Today, we're going to be talking about picking out and purchasing a cello. And I'm going to be referring to my notes a little bit here too, because this is kind of a longer topic. Excuse me. So, probably you have seen videos of professionals that are showing the differences between like $1 million violin versus an $800 violin. And you listen to them on both instruments and both sound really great because it's the touch of the master's hand. But I'm also going to say that the professional isn't going to choose the $800 instrument because the difference is the $800 instrument, you really have to work hard to get it to sound good, which ends up with you having repetitive injuries and different things like that. You want an instrument that makes playing easy. So we're going to go from there. Of course, when you're talking about a cello, it's going to be more expensive than a violin just because of its sheer size. And it also depends on the level that you're playing at. So typically, beginners on cello are going to have a cheaper instrument. Usually they're mass produced, and it makes it affordable for the beginner. When you get to an intermediate level, you don't want to have an instrument that sounds less than. It's no fun to play an instrument that doesn't sound good. And so typically about the intermediate time, you upgrade your cello from a beginner cello to an intermediate. And that's usually happening right at the beginning of that intermediate level. And then, of course, when you're advanced, you're going to need to have a cello that's basically a Ferrari type. It's got to be able to do everything that you need it to do. Now, you would think that just by looking at cellos, they all look the same. And yeah, they can look the same, but there's going to be some differences in their dimensions and the sounds that they produce. You could have a cello from the same manufacturer, the same luthier, and you could have two cellos that sound completely different. So I'm going to introduce you to my cello. This is my Christopher Dungy cello. It was made in 2016 by Christopher Dungy, who is a friend of mine, and it's an absolute beauty. And I'm going to say that this cello saved me from repetitive injuries and tendonitis in my left hand, and also really kind of my right hand too, because I was just working too hard with my previous cello to get it to do what I wanted. It was a beautiful sounding cello, but the problem is that it didn't project its sound. It sounded beautiful next to me. It filled up the space here, but it never went out. And so therefore I was pushing with my bow to try to get more volume. And there was another problem with that cello is that I was getting into pieces like the Haydn and C, where you're doing scales above the harmonic, starting with your thumb on that harmonic and on the G string and onto the D and then onto the A, and you're doing a shift. And I'm going to warn you right now, I haven't been playing in a little while, so if there's any demonstrations, this might be something I might go back and re-record, but there's been some personal reasons that I have taken a break from playing the cello, and I'm coming back to it now. My fingers are not very strong, so I'm going to avoid getting hurt and just really kind of scale back a little bit on this. So we'll do our best there. All right, so my cello, my little old German cello, could not sound good on strings other than the A above the harmonic. And it struggled with false harmonics and all sorts of different things. So an upgrade to my Dungy, I'm really happy with it. And it has really saved my playing, just switching. So we're going to move on. I'm just going to say something really short about if you are a beginner with the cello, that oftentimes you can go to an instrument store. They have online shops that you can also get this from. The only problem is with an online shop, you don't get to try out a huge variety of instruments. They generally send you maybe one or two to try out and see which one that you like. But these cellos do come in a package. So it comes with the cello, it's all set up and ready to go. You have your bow that comes with it, and also a case. Now, I do have to say a couple of things about the case. I have had students that have had the soft cases. I do not recommend them at all. Yes, they are light, but I can't tell you how many times I've had a student show up at a lesson and I have to put their cello back together because the bridge has been knocked off, all of the pegs are in a mess, and just because with a soft case you can bump the cello and it damages it quite easily. So even if you've got a half-size cello for a smaller child, it's worth it to spend about $130 or so to get a good case for it that's going to protect it so that it's usable. Another thing too I want to talk about is at least when I was little and I was moving up through instruments and through violin sizes and different things like that, I always wanted the more grown-up instrument, which, you know, that's what we all want to do when we're little, is grow up. But I'm also going to say that the size of the cello and the fit of the cello is very important, and it can prevent injuries. If you have a cello that is not comfortable and is too big for the hand to be comfortable, then you need to size down. So, like for instance, this is a full-size cello. I probably could have gone with a 7/8 cello. It probably would have been a better idea, but this is still very manageable for me. We don't want to have to be trying to stretch our fingers in positions that our hands don't fit. Of course, when you're a child, your hand's going to grow. I have run into adults that have very small hands and have struggled with their full-size instrument. And so there has been a time I had a student that had teeny tiny hands that we did size down to a 3/4 cello that was very quality to make it a little bit more manageable for her to do. She was having a hard time reaching her extensions, and you need an instrument that you can work in. Okay. All right, so at least as far as beginners go, you don't need a super duper cello. You just need one to get the job done, save some money on that. Now, I'm going to talk with intermediate and advanced students. So I know nobody likes to hear this. Old doesn't mean good. There's lots of antique cellos out there, and when I was in college, I wanted an antique cello. They just looked so cool. I tried one out for a few weeks, and when I took it into a luthier to have it checked out, and I'm sure glad I did, the sound post was actually starting to warp the front of the instrument. So the whole top of the instrument would have had to been removed, reshaped, and put all back together. So it was not going to be a good deal. And I wasn't sure exactly how it would sound. Because of that warping, it was really, really great in, if I remember right, it was the lower strings, but not the higher strings, just because everything works symbiotically with a cello. So one story that I had actually heard, and it was from Lynn Harrell, that he was also, he had a Stradivarius. I think he might have had a Moltegnana too. I'm not exactly sure. But I do know that he had expressed at one time to his teacher that he had concerns about some of those older antique instruments, that they're kind of too delicate. and that maybe they lose their responsiveness and their ability to really perform like louds and softs and um, yeah. So he was actually toward, his later years. He was he had an antique cello, but he also had a newer one that was done by a newer luthier. It was Chris Dungy again. That he also really appreciated. I believe he played the Shostakovich concerto with his Dungy just because it can take it. And some of our new luthiers are really putting out some beautiful instruments that are right up there with some of the old masters. So just be wary that old doesn't mean that it's good. Remember, the whole point of the cello is not the way it looks, and it's not how old it is, it's how it sounds and how comfortable it is to play. So something just to think about. So I want to talk about what you are looking for when you go for a cello. So this would be true for basically any cellist from beginning to maybe intermediate, possibly advanced. It just kind of depends on how comfortable you are with hearing the tones, and it takes some practice to do that. So when you're a beginner, you want to bring your teacher along, if you can do that, or another adult to try the cello or at least listen to the cello and make a comparison between the others. Because sometimes the cello, when you're sitting behind it, has one sound, but it might sound differently out in front, if that makes sense, or somebody that's sitting in the room listening. So always bring somebody with you if you can to trial cellos. Another thing too, hold on just a moment. I've got my little notes here. I've got to turn the page. All right. So, picking an instrument. Bring a variety of pieces of music with you that are very different in their tone and in their speed and in the technique that comes with it. So generally what I like to do is I like to bring maybe a Bach suite with me. Now, one of the hallmarks of a good cello is that it has some harmonic resonance. So when we're talking harmonics, it's the vibration of the string stopped at a certain point, but you're not completely stopping the string. So like on a cello, you might have an A, okay? And then it has a higher harmonic here. I'm a little shaky. That's the harmonic. So, but your cello is also going to have different overtones, things that vibrate when you're not in a harmonic. So like for instance, that was a little hard to get to today because my fingers don't want to do it. When I play a G, and it's going to be maybe too difficult to see, the G string over here is also going to vibrate sympathetically, if that makes sense. And so, do you hear that lovely resonance and the ring, all of that? When you have a good cello, everything's vibrating on it. Those sympathetic tones come out in all of the different fingerings. And that's what you're looking for. That's what gives you that fullness of sound, even though you can't hear when I play that. You can't hear this bottom G string vibrating, but it is. And it's adding to the sound of the cello. It would be very muted if you couldn't hear those overtones. So an example of a piece. Okay, first Bach suite. I can really hear, well, that's one of the frustrating things about a Bach suite is that sometimes it just, you hear, the professionals play and it's got this full sound. and everything's vibrating, and then you go to play it and it's like wah 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 wah. It just doesn't have that fullness of sound. You want that cello G string to ring and everything else with it. So that is a really good piece to use to judge how the harmonics are sounding on the cello, all of the vibration points, okay? One thing that we're going to talk about a little bit later with strings is that was always kind of a mystery to me when people would say, oh, you need new strings. Oh, you need new strings. How are you telling? It feels like the emperor has his new clothes on. I can't tell. But usually it's because I'm seeing harmonics like that, or I'm not hearing as much of the reverberation and the vibration going on. And that's kind of when we know when our strings are a little bit old. Okay, they start to disappear and the clarity begins to disappear. So I'm thinking another, to test the harmonics, like if you've got whoa, it's been a long time. So if you've got the Shostakovich concerto that has that whole passage in the second movement that's all harmonic based, that's a really great one to bring along to check the responsiveness of the cello, okay? Another one, you really want to make sure that your cello can sing. I have helped a friend before that was doing some sound post adjustments on the cello at their shop, all the different cellos, and I took two kind of opposing pieces with me to try out these cellos. We'd listen to them, make adjustments, listen again, and they were kind of intermediate instruments, and there was just one that I got to a passage and it just all of a sudden the light came on. It sang that part of the passage, and it so surprised me because the other instruments didn't do that for me. And I kind of looked at my friend and went, oh my gosh. And they were saying the same thing too, that you really want a cello that can sing. So something else to bring along that I'll probably butcher now is a slower passage. So like bringing the swan with you. Sorry, but that kind of gives you an idea of hearing a string instrument that can really sound, that can project, that has that heart melting feel is just such a fun thing to experience with a instrument. And then all of a sudden it just kind of clicks, that instrument is for you. So first of all, we've got, let's see, what did I put? Okay, Bach suite, something slower, something that maybe uses harmonics, okay, to see how things are going. Another thing too, and this is more, I would say this is more of a test of the bow, and we're going to talk about bows a little bit later, but to bring something that has a little bit of bounce to it. So I'm thinking of the scherzo on the Suzuki Book 8. That one, and I'm not going on, is another way to check the responsiveness of the instrument. You want to be able to go from note to note, string to string with ease. We don't want any extra fluff coming in there, okay? So that's a really good one to test responsiveness, but not necessarily the bounce. Bounce is going to come from your bow. We just want the instrument to change tones evenly and cleanly as we are playing the piece. So you might, if you're at a luthier or at a store, try out a couple of different bows We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But the bow is the part that makes the bounce. We want the instrument to be able to make the note changes clean and quickly. Okay. All right. Let's see. I've talked about the Shostakovich for the harmonics. The other one I'm thinking of is just kind of like the problem that was going on with my other cello. So you want to be able to do those scales and have it sound good. Okay. It's really, really difficult for those lower strings to get a good scale above the harmonic. You can get lots of squeaky, just muffled sounds. And when you get those muffled sounds, you're really pressing with your fingers, trying to get the best sound that you can out of that. And therefore, that's kind of where the repetitive injuries come from, is pressing too hard, too much tension in your fingers or even in your bow, arm, hand, different things like that. So as you're approaching, for sure, when you're hitting an upper intermediate to advanced, you've got to have an instrument that sounds good on all of the strings above the harmonic. It's just got to happen. Okay. Let's see. Another thing that I want to talk about too, when you get your new cello, you need to make sure that it has a case that fits. With my little German cello that I had before, I thought I was really clever, and I bought a cheaper case off the internet, and it came and it appeared that my cello fit, but unbeknownst to me, the bow holder was putting pressure on the front of the cello that actually ended up creating I can't even remember which side of the cello it was, but like a hairline crack there. And luckily, we were able to bead some glue on the outside, but otherwise, that's usually a really expensive fix that requires the whole top of the cello to come off to repair on the inside also. And so, lucked out there, but I had no idea that the case was hurting my instrument. So that's just something to make sure that you're careful of, is making sure that the case fits. One other popular thing with cases is having the wheels on the case. I was actually told not to use those cases because you're still rattling your cello around and bumping it. And so, by the time you get to your rehearsal or whatnot, your pegs have all undone themselves and your cello is out of tune. And it can cause other things too, maybe even for that sound post to shift. So we will talk about tuning in your cello and making it the very best that it can sound on a later video. We're going to talk about purchasing bows and some different ideas like that. Now, I'm just also going to basically say that these are the things that I have learned over the decades that I have played the cello. Don't want to give away the age. So if your teacher or your instructor has a different opinion, if you're hearing something else, go ahead and go with that opinion because you're a student of your teachers. But this is going to give you some different things that you can be thinking about and maybe improving upon as you are looking for a new instrument. So I'm hoping that you find an instrument that absolutely works beautifully for you, and you're going to love being a cello head. Thanks so much.